King Remus of Eridor was a man made of stone and shadow, but on his deathbed, the stone crumbled. His two children, the heir Prince Alaric and Princess Lyra, stood by his side in the dimly lit chamber, the air thick with the scent of milk poppy and regret. Alaric, ever the stoic, watched his father's decline with an impatient ambition he barely concealed. Lyra, however, held her father's cold hand, her heart aching. With a rattling breath, Remus pulled her closer, his voice a dry rasp meant only for them. "The crown is a lie," he whispered, his eyes wide with a fear that transcended death. "We are not the true blood. We are guardians. A pact was made in the Age of Ash. Our ancestor, the first Valerius, was a sworn knight who took the throne to save the realm from the mad Sunstone kings." He coughed, a spray of red on the white silk. "Our duty is not to rule forever. It is to find the lost heir of the Sunstone line and restore them. The proof lies beneath the Winter Chapel. Forgive me." He shuddered, and the life fled his eyes, leaving his terrible secret hanging in the silent room. The silence in the death chamber was shattered not by a scream, but by Alaric's cold, measured words. The ramblings of a mind gone to poppy and sickness. He turned from the bed, his shadow stretching long and monstrous in the candlelight. "Our line is the Valerius line. Our right is absolute. Father was a great man, but his final moments were a tragedy of a weakened mind." Lyra looked up, her face pale. "He was lucid, Alaric. He was terrified. It was a confession, not a fever dream." Alaric scoffed, walking towards the door. "Then it is a confession we will take to our graves. I am the king now. My first command to you, as your sovereign and brother, is to forget this madness." He paused, his hand on the ornate handle. "The coronation will be in a fortnight. You will stand by my side and smile, and we will secure the reign our ancestors fought to build. The Winter Chapel is a ruin. Let the past stay buried." He left without a backward glance, leaving Lyra alone with her father's body and the crushing weight of a sacred, impossible duty. She knew then that her path would not be alongside her brother, but in the shadows he wished to ignore. 3 nights later, under the sliver of a new moon, Lyra slipped out of the castle. Dressed in the drab garb of a servant, she carried a single hooded lantern to the northernmost edge of the castle grounds where the Winter Chapel stood. It was a forgotten place, a relic of an older time, its stone covered in ivy and its roof sagging with the weight of ages. The air inside was colder than the night, heavy with the scent of damp stone and decay. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Beneath the Winter Chapel, she ran her hands along the flagstones, searching for a seam, a keyhole, a symbol. Nothing. Despair began to creep in until her lantern light caught a faint carving on the base of the main altar, a knight kneeling before a sun. It was the sigil of the first Valerius. Pressing her palm against the sun symbol, she felt a deep, grinding click. A section of the stone floor before the altar shifted, revealing a set of steep, narrow stairs descending into absolute blackness. The air that rose from the opening was ancient and smelled of dust and sealed off history. The descent felt like a journey into the world's foundation. The air grew thick and still, and the steps ended in a small, circular vault. In the center of the room, resting on a simple stone pedestal, was a heavy, iron-bound chest. It was not locked. With trembling hands, Lyra lifted the lid. Inside, resting on faded velvet, was not treasure, but history. There was a leather-bound book, the Chronicle of Valerius, and a simple, elegant pendant shaped like a stylized sun, crafted from a warm, golden metal she didn't recognize. She opened the book. The script was her ancestors, detailing the horrific truth of the Sunstone kings. They weren't just mad. They commanded a volatile fire magic tied to their blood, a power that eventually consumed their sanity and threatened to burn the entire kingdom to ash. The first Valerius, their most trusted general, had staged the coup not for power, but for survival. He hid the last infant heir and took the throne, forging a pact to guard the realm until the magic in the Sunstone line stabilized over generations. The pendant was the key, the Chronicle said. It would grow warm in the presence of the true heir. Lyra clutched it, its metal cold against her skin. The day of the coronation arrived, a spectacle of gilded pomp designed to cement Alaric's authority. Banners bearing the Valerius knight flew from every turret, and the grand cathedral was filled with the perfumed nobility of Eredor. Alaric stood before the high septon, clad in black and silver, the very picture of strength and divine right. When the heavy iron crown of Eredor was placed upon his head, he did not flinch. Lyra watched from her designated place of honor, her stomach a knot of ice. She wore a gown of deep blue, a mask of serene loyalty painted on her face. Inside her bodice, wrapped in cloth, lay the Sunstone pendant, a cold reminder of the lie they were all celebrating. King Alaric, I turned to the assembly, his voice booming through the cathedral. I swear to uphold the sacred legacy of the Valerius dynasty. For centuries, we have been the bedrock of this kingdom, its protectors and its rightful rulers. So we are, and so we shall remain, forever. The crowd roared its approval. In that moment, Lyra knew the castle was no longer her home, but a prison. Her brother was not just a king, he was her jailer. Escape required more than courage. It required betrayal of a different kind. Lyra sought out Ser Kalen, her father's oldest and most loyal knight, a man whose face was a roadmap of forgotten battles. In the quiet of the royal stables, surrounded by the smell of hay and leather, she told him everything. She showed him the chronicle and the pendant. Kalen, whose loyalty to Remus was absolute, saw not a traitorous princess, but a daughter honoring her father's final command. He agreed to help. The plan was simple and therefore dangerous. During the Feast of the First Harvest, a celebration that would fill the city with farmers and traders, Lyra would slip away. Dressed as a boy, her hair shorn and her face smudged with dirt, she would join a merchant caravan heading east, toward the forgotten province of Sunstone Reach. Ser Kalen would create a diversion, a supposed stable fire that would draw the attention of the castle guard. As the chaos erupted, Lyra, with a small satchel containing the chronicle, the pendant, and a few coins, merged into the throng of the festival, leaving behind her name, her title, and the only life she had ever known. The journey east was a harsh education. The silks and velvets of court were replaced by scratchy wool and worn leather. Lyra, now calling herself Lynn, learned to sleep on hard ground, to ignore the gnawing ache of hunger, and to blend into the scenery of rural life. After 2 weeks, the caravan reached the Sunstone Reach. The land felt different here. The hills were starker, the air clearer, and the people, though poor, carried themselves with a quiet, stubborn pride. The Valerius name was spoken here not with reverence, but with a detached coolness. They were the castle kings, distant and irrelevant. Legends of the Sunstone lords, however, were still told by grandmothers in hushed tones, stories of warmth, light, and a terrible, brilliant madness. Following the scant clues in the chronicle, Lynn sought the village of Amberfall, nestled in a valley where the river was said to run warm even in winter. It was here, the book hinted, that the last Sunstone guardian had fled with the royal infant centuries ago. As she walked the muddy track into the valley, the pendant, tucked beneath her tunic, seemed to pulse with a faint, almost imperceptible warmth for the first time. Amberfall was a village of stone cottages and hard-working people. Lynn found work at the local forge, mending tools and tending the fire, her soft hands quickly becoming calloused. The forge was owned by a young man named Reese, an orphan raised by the village. He was quiet, strong, with eyes the color of warm honey and an uncanny intuition for the fire he commanded, knowing just when to heat and when to cool the metal. He was well-liked, known for his fairness and a temper that, though rare, burned as hot as his forge. Lynn watched him, her heart pounding. One evening, as he worked late, hammering a plowshare, she accidentally dropped the Sunstone pendant near him. It fell to the dirt floor, and as Reese glanced down, the pendant flared with a soft, golden light, its warmth now unmistakable. He stared at it, confused. "What is that?" he asked, his voice low. "An old heirloom," Lynn replied, her voice trembling slightly. "It is said to glow near a person of great worth." He picked it up, and in his hand, it shone like a miniature sun. The blacksmith of Amberfall, his face illuminated by its impossible light, was the last son of the Sunstone kings. Convincing Reese was harder than finding him. He laughed at first, dismissing it as a traveler's tale. But the pendant was undeniable, and the chronicle, which Lyra read to him night after night, resonated with a truth he couldn't ignore. The stories of his uncanny connection to fire, his flashes of temper, his feeling of being an outsider, it all clicked into place. The blood of the Sunstone kings ran in his veins. Acceptance brought not ambition, but a heavy sense of duty. His people in the Reach were neglected, and Alaric's reign was already proving harsh, with tax collectors growing more aggressive. Lyra and Rhys began to move in secret, first revealing the truth to the village elders of Amberfall, who swore fealty on the spot. They then traveled to the scattered keeps of old noble families, houses that had been stripped of influence by the Valerius regime. They presented the chronicle and the living proof of Rhys, whose calm strength and connection to the pendant won over the skeptical. Meanwhile, back in the capital, King Alaric's spies brought him news of a seditious princess and a blacksmith pretender. Enraged, he dispatched his most ruthless commander, Lord Forlag, and the elite Shadow Guard with a single order: bring him his sister's head and burn the pretender's village to the ground. The news of the Shadow Guard's approach traveled faster than they did. It was a death sentence marching towards them. Panic was the first reaction, but Rhys, with a steadiness that belied his youth, quelled their fear. He was not a king who hid in a castle. He was a blacksmith who knew his land and his people. They would not meet the heavily armored guard on an open field. Their army was a patchwork of farmers with pitchforks, grizzled hunters with longbows, and a few dozen household guards from the minor lords, but they had the advantage of terrain. Lyra, using the strategic knowledge from her royal education, worked with Rhys to plan their defense. They chose the narrow pass of Amber Gorge, a choke point where the Shadow Guard's numbers would mean little. On the eve of the battle, Lyra and Rhys stood on a cliff overlooking the pass. Below, hundreds of small campfires flickered like fallen stars, a tiny constellation of defiance against a tyrant. The air was cold and tense with the promise of bloodshed. "They come for a blacksmith," Rhys said quietly, his hand resting on the hilt of a sword he'd forged himself. "Let's hope they are prepared for a Sunstone," Lyra replied, the pendant at her throat glowing with a steady, defiant warmth.